Good morning. And to many of you, good afternoon. I'm Lori Kletzer. I'm the campus provost and executive vice chancellor. And I would like to start with our campus land acknowledgement. The land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Awaswas-speaking Upi tribe, the Amamutsan tribal band, comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taken to missions Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. I am thrilled to be here this morning and to be taking part in this event. And I am so happy to see so many faculty, staff, student colleagues here in the Namaste Lounge on campus, and to see some familiar faces at the University of California's Washington Center. This is a bi-coastal event with speakers from both locations, and we've planned it for about an hour. Allow me to give you a quick idea of who's with us today. In Washington, let me wave again, at the University of California, Washington, D.C. Center, we have UC Santa Cruz Chancellor Cynthia LaRive, together with Linda Early Chastain, former Chief of Staff to Congressman John R. Lewis, and President and CEO of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation. We also have Representative Jimmy Panetta and UCSC Dean of Social Sciences, Catherine Mischel. I would like to also acknowledge my colleague Helen Shapiro, who heads the University of California's UCDC program, an experiential learning program in the nation's capital. Helen is a familiar face to many on campus, as she is a professor of sociology and the former provost of colleges 9 and 10 here at UCSC. Let me say it again, it is really nice to see all of you. We have a great crowd here in Santa Cruz with hundreds and hundreds, and yes, I mean hundreds, are joining us virtually from around the globe. That number is 1,109 people are joining us through the great advantage of Zoom. Speaking here today in the Namaste Lounge, I'm happy to have with us and with me up here, Flora Liu, the Provost of Colleges 9 and 10 and Professor of Environmental Studies. Good morning, Flora. Sarah Woodside-Berry, Senior Director of College Student Life for Colleges 9 and 10. Good morning, Sarah. And I am very pleased to have with us today John Brown-Childs, Professor of Sociology Emeritus. Good morning, John. We will begin with our speakers in DC. So I will toss this virtual mic over to Chancellor LaRive in Washington.
Thank you, Lori. Before I begin, I'd like to say that here in the District of Columbia, we're following their COVID prevention protocols. So speakers will remove their masks when we're here at the podium and then put them back on when we finish speaking. We're also having physical distancing. This is a momentous day for UC Santa Cruz, for our extended campus community, and for College 10. I sense the excitement unfolding on our campus, and I'm glad to share in that excitement today here at the University of California's Washington Center in the District of Columbia. The center is home to the UCDC program, which provides our students and those from all the University of California campuses the opportunities to study and work in our nation's capital. They witness firsthand the tireless work of governing day in and day out. Importantly, we're also just a few minutes away from the United States Capitol building, which is where the late Congressman John R. Lewis cemented his legacy as one of the most important figures in this country's historic and continuing struggle for freedom, equality, democracy, and basic human rights for all. Representative Lewis is central to our story today. Representative Lewis may no longer walk the halls of Congress, but his legacy continues here and across the country. He remains a moral compass in the national debate on racial equality and justice, and we need that legacy more than ever today, as laws to curtail voting rights and disempower Americans are being enacted across the nation. It harkens back to the time, more than a half century ago, when Representative Lewis was putting miles on the soles of his shoes, making good trouble for the advancement of the Voting Rights Act, for the advancement of equal rights, and for the advancement of basic human rights. Freedom, equity, and justice are American ideals, but they are just ideals without consistent work and community commitment. John Lewis did that hard work throughout his life, and UC Santa Cruz aspires to do that work as well. And that is why this moment in our history matters so much to our campus community. It is a great honor to announce today the naming of College10 as the University of California, Santa Cruz as John R. Lewis College. While Congressman Lewis represented Atlanta in Congress, his constituency always included the disadvantaged and the disenfranchised, regardless of where they called home. UC Santa Cruz strives to follow this example, creating access to higher education and providing our students with the education and experiences they need to change their own lives and to change the world. Our residential colleges are an important component of UC Santa Cruz's student experience. Each of our 10 colleges is a hub of intellectual and social engagement, a unique living and learning environment that provides a platform for engaging in a large research institution. College10 is our youngest and one of our most diverse colleges. Of its 1,500 undergraduates, more than 60% grew up speaking another language, either in addition to or instead of English. More than 30% are first-generation students, the first in their family to attend college. College10 is home to a series of robust programs designed to realize its themes of social justice and community, all aimed at empowering students to create positive change. It is a fitting choice for College10 to become John R. Lewis College. We are humbled by this naming and excited for the next steps in this journey. An endowment pledged by private donors and longtime supporters of UC Santa Cruz will fund programming, courses, experiential opportunities, and initiatives that will carry social justice ideals forward generation after generation. This is a joyous moment for our campus, attesting to our deep commitment to educate students to become agents for justice, equity, inclusivity, and social change, and marking our ambition to be an educational institution that through our mission and through the work of our students who choose to learn here, continues to honor the legacy. There are many people and organizations who helped to make this moment possible. I would like to thank them. Michael Collins and the John R. Lewis Trust, represented today by Linda Early Chastang, former Chief of Staff to Congressman Lewis and President and CEO of the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation. Former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Andrew Young, U.S. Congressman Jimmy Panetta, University of California President Michael V. Drake, the Reverend Dwight Andrews, and the extraordinary donors whose continued selfless acts of philanthropy demonstrate to us how to advance vital and just causes in meaningful ways with kindness, humility, and joy. Undertaking a naming means you need broad-based institutional support. And I'd also like to acknowledge the support of our campus naming committee and both our campus and the UC system-wide academic senates who offered their encouragement. Support for this naming has been universal, and with good reason. John Lewis did immense good in his lifetime. He demonstrated the remarkable difference that just one person can make. A college in his name is a profound honor and a great responsibility for UC Santa Cruz. Our campus community will strive daily to live up to the legacy of Representative Lewis and to answer his call to create a more just and fair society. I would now like to introduce Linda Early Chastain to speak on behalf of the John R. Lewis Trust.
Well, I am really excited to be here today. And I can only begin to tell you just how excited John Lewis would be to have me here to celebrate with you. I'll tell you a little story. I met Congressman Lewis when I was 14 years old. I grew up here in Washington. We belonged to a small Presbyterian church, an activist church, and we had civil rights leaders come to visit us on a regular basis. John, like the others, would meet with young people like myself then and spent a lot of time talking about why they were doing what they were doing and the role that we had as young teenagers at that time in the movement. But John would stay back. He would talk and talk and talk and share stories, have conversations with us in the small gathering space over lemonade. And he would not stop until everyone's questions had been answered. That was important to him. Young people are very, very important to him. Older people are too. And I know I'm talking in the present tense, but that's how I think of him. Nothing's more important to him than a good education, an education that prepares you to make a difference in the lives of others, an education that prepares you to provide the support that your neighbors need. When your neighbor can't think about something or can't do something, think for him or her. Do for him or her. And what I know of your college is that you're being trained to do just that. He is very happy to know that you are honoring him and his legacy in this way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda, for those personal remarks. It's now my pleasure to introduce Congressman Jimmy Panetta, whose district includes the University of California, Santa Cruz, and whose help enabled this naming.
Thank you, Chancellor Larive. Thank you, Linda Early Chastain. Thank you to all of you who are here today for this opportunity to be a part of this momentous ceremony. And also thank you for all of your work together to not just name a college at the University of California, Santa Cruz, but to also enshrine and ensure the everlasting legacy of John Robert Lewis on the Central Coast of California. Now, this is special to my community for many reasons. And I have to say, this is also special to me for many reasons. Of course, UCSC is special to our home there on the Central Coast, as it has always been that guiding beacon for social issues in our community. Similar to how John Lewis was special to us in the United States Congress, because he was that spiritual, that social guide, not just to my colleagues, but to that institution. He was and still is the conscience of Congress. Now, it's appropriate that College10 is renamed for John Robert Lewis, as it is a college that focuses on social justice and community. And with its motto of justice for all, this college clearly stands for the issues and values of freedom, equality, democracy, and human rights that are very pertinent to the life of John Lewis and that were very personal to John Lewis because they are very personal and imperative to our community and to our country. These are also issues that I saw John Lewis fight for professionally in the United States Congress. Look, you don't know how lucky I am to be able to stand up here and say, I served with John Lewis in the United States Congress. But I also admit, you don't know how overwhelmed and undeserving I feel to stand up here and say, I served with John Lewis in the United States Congress. Now, even though I know I will never live up to the legacy of John Lewis, but always strive to, I know that I am always inspired to fight and to uphold his work and his fight for civil rights. See, I not only served with John, I worked on legislation with John Lewis as members of the Ways and Means Committee. His legislation that's included in the historic infrastructure package that we're working on now that includes tax credits for colleges that have environmental justice programs. His legislation that demonstrates John's lasting legacy for equality and justice for all, and legislation that's understandably and proudly his namesake for our voting rights, legislation that is needed now more than ever. But beyond his legislation that influenced Congress, I have to say, I also remember the stories that influence our colleagues. I'll never forget him telling us the story of the first time when he met Martin Luther King. And when he said, Mr. King, I'm John Robert Lewis. And Martin Luther King responded immediately, oh yeah, the boy from Troy. I'll never forget John telling us about the first time when he was arrested for protesting in Nashville, Tennessee. And he told us that before he went to Nashville, he went out and bought a $5 brand new suit so he could, quote unquote, look fresh. And I'm telling you, if you Google that booking photo, you'll not only see John, you'll not only see that suit, and oh yeah, does he look fresh. And I'll never forget the last time John crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama on the anniversary of Bloody Sunday on March 7th, 2020. A day when my wife, my two daughters, and I were on that bridge marching arm in arm with John. A day that I will never forget, a day that my daughters will never forget. And 55 years earlier, because of John, because of his fight, because of his fortitude for us, it was a day that our nation will not and must not ever forget. Now, I'm sure that these are just some of the stories and some of the lessons and some of the values that will be told, that will be taught, that will be trained, and will be instilled at University of California, Santa Cruz's John Lewis College. And yes, I'm sure it will be that same inspiration that his colleagues felt in Congress that will now be felt by the students at John Lewis College. And let me tell you, those students will not just feel lucky to attend such a namesake college, they too will feel inspired to live up to his legacy. Because guess what? Now John Lewis is the conscience of that college. And our hope is that by learning how to be the conscience of their communities, that is why the students of John Lewis College will be the conscience of who we are as a country. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Congressman Panetta. So now we can turn our attention to the UC Santa Cruz campus. I'm pleased to introduce the Provost of College10. Well, I believe I can now say the Provost of John R. Lewis College, Flora Liu, and Sarah Woodside Burry, who is the Senior Director of College Student Life.
As co-leaders of the college, we have the honor and privilege of working with our students, both inside and outside the classroom, in order to graduate students committed to social change. This mission compelled each of us to work at College10, the newest college, founded in 2002. As we prepare to celebrate our 20th anniversary next year, we're proud and humbled to take on the name of John R. Lewis. Our college theme, social justice and community, which resonates at the core of John Lewis's life work, is an expression of a consistent focus and commitment, thanks in large part to our amazing staff, past and present, and their extraordinary dedication to social justice education. At College10 and its academically infused student programming, students discover what social justice and community mean to them. Our programs promote deep reflection and action in which students practice and embody these important concepts. As one of our College10 alumni, Tamansin Macias, said, social justice, quote, social justice and community means caring about and feeling invested in issues that do not necessarily affect me, but that significantly impact others. It means becoming aware of the inequality and discrimination inflicted due to a person's race, religion, sexual orientation, place of origin, ability, and other aspects of their identity and lived experience. It also means creating a community that supports and welcomes everyone. I became a better person because of what I learned from our College10 community, end quote. In the same way Tanansin learned from the College10 community, the College10 community learns from human rights activists and intellectuals such as John Lewis. At College10, we strive to become better people from John Lewis's example. Today, our dedication to social justice and community takes on an even deeper depth and resonance as we name John R. Lewis College. At Lewis College, our work will be to translate his values and vision into pedagogy and practice. We too will be guided by the goals of being of service to others. We will center youth voices and their leadership. We will recognize and celebrate the humanity and interconnectedness of all people.
College10 and its sister, College9, have one of the longest running community service programs on campus. Students have interned at organizations such as the Homeless Garden Project, Habitat for Humanity, and the Boys and Girls Club. They have also participated in Alternative Spring Break and organized a club for weekly volunteer opportunities. In 2018, College10 created the Apprenticeship in Community Engaged Research. This integrates community service, methodological and ethical training, experiential learning, and undergraduate research mentored by faculty. With efforts focused on environmental justice and educational equity, our community engaged research teaches students to highlight and value diverse sources of expertise, to engage in research and community learning that promotes positive change, and to create knowledge in service of marginalized communities. John Lewis exemplified the leadership and courage of youth and students. Much of College10's programming is anchored in student leadership. Every year, students organize our flagship event, the Practical Activism Conference, a day-long conference which features keynote addresses by national and international activists, workshops on various social justice issues, and spoken word and other artistic expressions. Student organizers prepare for the Practical Activism Conference by taking a student taught course, Social Justice Issues Workshop, which brings together undergraduates from all backgrounds and majors to educate themselves and each other and how to take collective action to address various social justice issues. All entering Frosh at College 10 take a course that examines the roots of prejudice, discrimination, and violence directed at individuals and groups based on characteristics such as race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and religion. Our students learn to think critically about privilege and inequality, the social construction of identity, structures of oppression, and forms of resistance. We teach our students that they are complex beings with intersectional identities, and that we have a shared humanity and are all worthy of dignity and respect. At Lewis College, we will continue endeavoring to build the beloved community that John Lewis envisioned and tirelessly pursued.
Another College 10 student, Sean Remigio, said at his graduation, but we think it apt to reiterate here, quote, "I wish for today to not only be a celebration, but a call to action. I think of the time in my first year when I heard Angela Davis say, quote, I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept, quote. Our generation has immeasurable strength and the capacity to make history as catalysts for change. May we break down the walls that confine us and know that our battles are not fought alone. The oppression we face is intertwined and our liberation is connected, end quote. We know that John Lewis lived in hope. He believed that hope shaped history. He believed the better angels imagined by Abraham Lincoln could prevail, that American people remain capable of heeding the still, small voice of conscience. John Meacham wrote about John Lewis, quote, the American present and future may in many ways hinge on the extent to which the rest of us draw lessons from his example, end quote. Here at UC Santa Cruz and beyond, the memory and legacy of John Lewis remain vibrant, alive, impactful. That legacy will be central to how we remember and teach the lessons of history and how we forge a future worthy of those who have struggled and sacrificed in the name of justice and equity. It is a legacy we strive to live up to as we deepen, create, and expand co-curricular programs dedicated to transformative education inspired by John R. Lewis. Thank you.
I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, John Brown Childs. During his 22 years at UC Santa Cruz, Professor Emeritus of Sociology, John Brown Childs, became known locally, nationally, and internationally as a pioneer in community engaged scholarship, as an inspirational teacher, and a change agent for social justice. Professor Childs retired about a decade ago, but has continued to lecture and publish in 3 major areas: on his own theory and practice of transcommunality, on Indigenous studies, and on the history of African Americans within US and European social movements. In 2003, Professor Childs wrote the book on transcommunality, a concept that points to how people can maintain rooted affiliations while simultaneously creating constellations of cooperation that draw from their diversity. Transcommunality is derived from the work of Martin Luther King Jr. and the Haudenosaunee Iroquois Confederation, a bridging that reflects his own identity as Black and Indigenous. Even in retirement, Professor Childs continues to have a major impact on social justice efforts and organizations in Santa Cruz County and beyond. He is a leader in seeking peaceful alternatives to gang and youth violence and creating positive outlets for incarcerated youth and men. Professor Childs has spent over a dozen years teaching courses on transcommunality at the Soledad State Prison as part of the Barrios Unidos Prison Project. At College10, Professor Childs has been engaged as a faculty fellow, as a keynote speaker at our commencement, and as the creator and instructor of a College10 course, Transcommunal Cooperation and Peacemaking, which brings UC Santa Cruz students to Soledad to learn collaboratively with incarcerated men in a space of compassion and respect. Please join me in welcoming Professor Childs.
Thank you, Flora. Greetings. Sarah Woodside Burry has just said that John Lewis lived in hope. And I will add, he also made hope live. He made hope live through his courageous compassion and profound ability to reach out with positive intention and practical method to all peoples in this complex world of divisions and conflicts. On August 28th, 1963, I had the good fortune to be one of over 200,000 people at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where, of course, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his famous and brilliant "I Have a Dream" speech. As a college student, I had helped to organize a contingent from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, which was going to be one of thousands of groups from around the country going to DC. An amazing moment inside of that overall amazing moment was the speech by John Lewis of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC. He spoke with passion about the profound changes needed to go from inequality to equality. He was fired up, and he fired us up. This young, just 23-year-old Black man speaking to that huge, peaceful, and politically galvanized gathering. He said in part, quote, "We need a bill that will provide for the homeless and starving people of this nation," end quote, "and it will ensure what today we call a living wage. We will march," he called out to us, "with the spirit of love and with the spirit of dignity." As I heard those words, I felt the combining of compassion and love for all, alongside the determination to engage in action for social justice, not just with words, but also with positive deeds. His were courageous words of a brave man. Those were dangerous times. It is important to remember that the 1963 DC March was preceded and followed by two horrible events. On June 12th, just a little over 2 months before the DC March, Medgar Evers, the activist field secretary of the Mississippi NAACP, who was also a World War II Army veteran, was assassinated at his home in front of his family in Jackson, Mississippi. On Sunday, September 15th, just a few weeks after the DC March, a bomb consisting of 16 sticks of dynamite and a timing device planted by a local Ku Klux Klan group blew up the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, killing 4 little Black girls attending Sunday school, while injuring dozens of people in that church. I call the names of those children who were killed: Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, Carol Robinson, and Carol Denise McNair. The message of John Lewis to us about moving forward with love and dignity was sorely tested by these and hundreds upon hundreds of violent attacks on individuals, organizations, and churches over many years. Some of them reported, many of them not, but known to all who lived in those places and moments. To move forward with love and dignity in those crisis-filled times, in the face of hate-filled resistance, required deep courage that John Lewis had already demonstrated and would continue to do for the rest of his life. To maintain nonviolence in the face of violence required extraordinary discipline. It was, in fact, incredibly common among the women and men of the movement, such as Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, Hardy Fry, my dear late friend who would later become a professor of sociology here at UCSC. James Foreman, Reverend Andrew Young, Elizabeth Martinez, Reverend Ralph Abernathy, Prathia Hall, Stokely Carmichael, Bob Moses, Diane Nash, Hosea Williams, Rosa Parks, and so many others. I was able to witness and be inspired by this discipline and courage when, as a member of the organization Friends of SNCC, I participated in some of the voting rights activity in Montgomery, Alabama, right after that pivotal 1965 Selma to Montgomery march, during which John Lewis and others had been brutally beaten at the Edmund Pettus Bridge during what became known as Bloody Sunday. Their discipline was not a mechanical framework of rules. Rather, I suggest that for John Lewis, it flowed from the deep springs of human compassion. We must, he said in 2012, quote, release the need to hate, to harbor division, and the enticements of revenge. Release all hate, hold only love, end quote. Today, I see that John Lewis spirit in the release from the need to hate while holding only love among the multi-ethnic incarcerated men known as the Peace Warriors in Soledad Correctional Training Facility with whom I work. Peace Warrior, by the way, is also a term that John Lewis used. I see the spirit of John Lewis in the positive work of our Santa Cruz community organizations, such as Barrios Unidos and its tireless executive director, Danielle Adane Alhadlis. I see it in the Resource Center for Nonviolence and its executive director, Sylvia Morales, and in the Santa Cruz NAACP and its president, Brenda J. Griffin, to name but a few. And now, alongside such constructive community organizations and leaders, we have the John R. Lewis College, standing strong and inspired by his life, guided by the dedication of Senior Director Sarah Woodside-Burry and Provost Flora Liu, animated by the creative energy of our students, faculty, and alumni, and staff, supported by generous, thoughtful, forward-looking donors, and by our hardworking administrators, Chancellor Cynthia LaRive, Executive Vice Chancellor Lori Kletzer, and Social Science Dean Catherine Mitchell. We need all such positive workers now more than ever. Today, our democracy is in dire danger. We are confronted by voices and actions inflaming our nation with emotionalism, fear, and hatred. The voting rights for which so many struggled and died have over the years been undermined, and we now face an avalanche of restrictive voter suppression laws and bills throughout the country. Only by working together as diverse allies inside of and outside of many institutional settings can we propel our nonviolent movement on the pathway of democracy's progress that John Lewis helped to chart. In his 2012 book, Across That Bridge, A Vision for Change in the Future of America, John Lewis says the following, quote, all our work, all our struggle, all our days add up to one purpose, to reconcile ourselves to the truth and finally accept once and for all that we are one people, one family, the human family, that we are all emanations of one divine source, and that source is love. Our struggle to affirm the light despite oppression, depression, conflict, poverty, hunger and disease, violence and brutality is a loving gift that we give to ourselves and one another to help humanity move toward that day when we can readily separate the light from the darkness. You are the light. If you allow your truth down the road to peace and the affirmation of love, you shine like a beacon for all to see. Then the poetry of the great dreamers and philosophers is yours to manifest in a nation, in a world community, and a beloved community that is finally at peace with itself, end quote. To those words, I can only add, amen, Brother Lewis. Amen. Thank you. I will now hand over to Chancellor Larive.
Well, thank you, John, Flora, and Sarah, for your remarks this morning. I'd like to thank everyone who's taken part in today's celebration, both here in Washington and at the Namaste Lounge on our campus, and virtually around the world. Advancing social justice, championed by Representative Lewis throughout his life, is fundamental to our mission as a university. Having his name connected to UC Santa Cruz will forever remind and inspire our students and our alumni to fight injustice where they see it and to leave the world a better place than when they found it. While we are announcing this naming today, we will officially change the name of the physical spaces on campus this coming spring, when we will host an official dedication that we hope you will all join us for. Between now and that dedication, the college and the university will begin the development of programming that will highlight and advance the work of Representative Lewis. We now begin the hard work at UC Santa Cruz to live up to this extraordinary honor and responsibility. Thank you for joining us.